This is Apotheosis, the official podcast of the Production Designers Collective. I'm your host, Alexander Whittenberg. Thanks for tuning in to the first episode of our sub-series, Apotheosis, on collaboration. We're thrilled to kick things off with production designer Sarah Greenwood and set decorator Katie Spencer, whose celebrated collaboration spans many projects, including Barbie, Darkest Hour, Beauty and the Beast, Anna Karenina, Atonement, and many more. Together, their work has earned them 7 Oscar nominations. Today, we chat about their work on many of these films and explore what makes a great collaboration something to be treasured. As you listen, please keep in mind that these conversations are recorded in a nomadic and remote space, which may lead to inconsistencies in quality, but we'll always do our best to deliver a great listening experience. If you've been enjoying Apotheosis, please take a moment to subscribe, rate the podcast, and share with those who might also enjoy the show. This episode is presented by our friends at Roscoe. Production designers understand that when you're building a world, every detail matters. At Roscoe Digital Imaging, we understand that too, and we're here to help. For over 30 years, we've partnered with designers to bring their visions to life through custom backdrops, a massive rental inventory, Academy Award-winning day-night soft drop technology, and a curated global image library. Our RDI team is there to assist you through every step of the design process, so every detail is intentional and production ready. Whether you are looking for a custom one-of-a-kind backdrop solution or something sustainable and budget-friendly, Roscoe has got you covered. Visit roscoedigitalimaging.com and start building your next world. Now here's my conversation with Sarah Greenwood and Katie Spencer. Sarah and Katie, thank you so much for being here for the very first episode of On Collaboration with Apotheosis. You two are such a remarkable duo. And to kick it off, I'd love to ask you, what does creativity mean to you?
Well, that's the root, isn't it? That's the baseline. That is the genesis of what we do, creativity. So it's Sarah talking here. I'm here with Katie in the lovely county of Somerset. So, I think creativity is something that is kind of innate in all of us. We're born with it, right from babies when we first open our eyes and we first put whatever in our mouths and all of that. It's just curiosity and, an instinctive kind of want of learning. We really want to find out what's going on in that world around us. And it's something that stays with us probably, I don't know, instinctively till about the age of 5 or 6. And then it begins to get kind of questioned and crushed, and we get embarrassed and we get a bit sensitive about it. And, is it something we have to learn again? I don't know. But, I think it's there in all of us. And I think it's it's up to you where you want to take it. We were talking about it earlier, and it doesn't preclude certain things. Mathematics, to people who can do mathematics, is incredibly creative, and physics and quantum physics and all of those things are amazing. But for us, creativity is, it's a root of everything that we do. It comes out of creativity and curiosity and knowledge and garnering everything in this world.
I think that's exactly right. And I think it is rooted in your childhood, and it's trying to keep that sense of wonder that you have in everything around you, that you can see it in babies and children, and that love of learning, that when you're free to learn, when you're free to wonder, and before that gets sort of coerced out of you by having to follow certain parameters, certain regimes at school and things like that. Yeah. And I think we are really, really lucky to work in what they call the creative industries, where we're given license to that. Whereas I think everybody is creative. You make creative choices in the kitchen, you make creative choices in the garden, you make creative choices choosing which way to, walk to work, whatever it is you do and within your work. And I think it does I mean, there's a reason why they say that film is like play, because you do have that sort of liberty to do certain things. Yes, there are restrictions, mind you, there are restrictions in the budget, but you have to be
Yeah.
creative with them sometimes as well.
Yeah.
The word that probably comes up on this podcast more than any other is curiosity. So
Mhm.
it's great to hear you both, kind of call back to that, because I do think there's something that being a production designer is very much about being curious about the world. And that's sort of, although everybody has a different way of doing this job and working in film and being a set decorator, it's the same thing, of course.
Mhm.
That idea of curiosity, of just constantly seeking another layer in the characters, in the places that these characters inhabit, etc., etc. And you mentioned the word play, which reminds me of sort of plays themselves in the theater. And I personally work a lot in the theater right now. And I always think about that word play. It's funny that even if it is, something very serious and dramatic, like Oedipus or let's say Death of a Salesman, there is this sense of it's still play, and it harkens back to this sense of childlike curiosity of playing and discovering things. So
Mhm.
speaking of childhood, I want to go back earlier, and I'd love to ask what was maybe an inspiration in your early years that set you on a certain creative path.
It's interesting. I mean, I was lucky enough to, my father was an engineer, my mother was a physiotherapist, but my father was also an artist, and he did everything from painting through to lino cuts through to jewelry making, furniture making, and he had these phases of all of that. But what it meant was we were always encouraged to do whatever we wanted within that. And actually, I would also say, I can put certain labels on looking back, but the only thing that interested me and therefore I was any good at was art at school, right through to senior school, to whatever I was studying. And I remember my mum doing last-ditch attempts to try and get me to go into her side of the family is totally medical, doctors, dentists, the lot, nurses, physios, occupational. She says, right. And she got me doing this occupational therapy for a week with all these old dears, and I created absolute chaos everywhere. And I think that was when my parents just gave up and said, right, you can go to art school. That's it. You can go. Um, it was like it was just there, and this interest in film, this interest in theater, and galleries, and I don't know. I think when you're young and before you know that you're really lucky and privileged to have that encouragement, I just accepted that as a part of one's life. It was there, and that's what we did, and and I think, and then, well, then it just like, well, there's stories there of how it then manifested itself into where one ends up, today.
I think it is. I mean, my background, I don't come from an art background at all, actually, but I do come from what we said earlier. I had parents, especially my mother, who instilled the love of learning and books. And, reading was a big thing to let your imagination flow, which came from the home. It didn't come from the school. School wasn't particularly brilliant at all. But also, I remember conversation, talking, sparking things off, things like that, ideas, is that garden of ideas thing. And also, I remember going around Corfe Castle once, which is, how old's Corfe Castle? Well, no, I don't know. It's
A 1,000 years.
1,000 years old. And I remember walking around as a very little, I don't know, 9 or something, thinking, God, why can't I see what it was like, then? But then that's what we do. And so we are kind of like time travels in some way. I mean, how amazing.
Absolutely.
Time travel
Yeah.
with character and definition.
Yeah.
So I
With
think
purpose.
with purpose, but I
Yeah.
think it is, there is an inspiration somewhere, whether you find it from other movies, whether you find it from people, whether you find it from books, because you just need that spark, because
Yeah.
it's in everybody. Somebody just needs to light that spark,
Yeah.
I think.
I think so, yeah. The purposeful time traveler is a new way to reframe the job,
Yeah.
isn't it? One of many jobs within it.
Yeah. I'd read that book.
No, but it's true because I remember that book when
Which book?
it's a particularly English book or British book. It's called the Ladybird books. I don't know if you remember them, but they had these really kind of bright. They were full page, one page of text, one page of illustration, and they were just very informative. They were very informative. So I remember Robin Hood. You know, and I can still see the pictures now. You know, and they told you exactly what it was like in Sherwood Forest in medieval
Yeah,
times.
that's amazing.
But I mean, I certainly think that
Oh, they were great though, weren't they?
they were.
I love them.
Yeah.
And we all got given one when we left primary school.
Yeah.
Just to choose which one you want.
Yeah. Clear the
Well,
shadows.
this is a bit of a diversion, but I'm curious if you were able to hop in a time machine right now and go anywhere, any period, any place. Do you have one that immediately jumps to mind?
I can.
Go on then.
Well, I think kind of about 1500 BCE.
Oh yeah.
Mycenaean culture.
Yeah.
Oh, brilliant.
You want to be a woman or a man there?
Well, there you go. There you go. There you go.
You have to. Wherever you go back time traveling, you need wealth.
Yeah, you need wealth, and you need. I don't know. I mean, I always find it fascinating when you get these films. I don't think we've ever done one where somebody goes back in time, and actually, because we were working on one this year where somebody goes, it's basically goes back 400 years, and that is very funny when you have somebody. You know, it's like American Werewolf in London. You know, it's when you go off,
you're out of your norm.
You're out of your norm, and you know it's kind of like what would they see of us? And I think do you know the thing that strikes me most is the smell. I think the smell be astonishing. Actually, you know, it's and the kind of and the fact that they packed so much into their very short lives. You know, here we are with our life expectancies of it's just gone down in the UK, but you know. And there they maybe lived, 30, 40, 50 years maximum. You were old if you were 50. And I just think, that would have such a, the way of life, the fact that it's all to do with nature, the fact that it's to do with the cycles of the lunar cycles and all of that, I find absolutely fascinating.
I know that the origin story, as it were, is probably many people listening probably know, some of the experiences you shared together early on. But if you might just regale us on sort of how your relationship began.
We both started in theatre, which has an immense kind of features heavily in our work and our thinking. But skipping over that, we met at the BBC where we were both working, and you were working with a designer called Bruce McCady, who in fact also came from theatre.
Yeah, he did.
And we met in a tea bar, tea bar or something.
Yeah. Bruce was an amazing old school designer. I mean, he was sadly no longer with us, but he was quite tough. He was very tough. He had this, he stammered, but when he got angry, the stammer would go completely, and he was angry quite a lot. But anyway, he liked Sarah and I because we came from theatre, because he thought that was proper. And he said, Sarah got let down by somebody, and he said, I think he came up to you because he liked Sarah, even though he didn't like young people. He liked you. He said, I think you should work with Katie. I think you might get on. And there we did, and that was after Miss Julie. Wasn't it?
Was, yeah, and then and that's how things roll. You're lucky enough to meet that. It's synchronicity, whatever it is, and we worked on After Miss Julie, which was Patrick Marber's adaptation of Miss Julie, and we worked with Kathy Burke and Phil Daniels. And then Kathy Burke introduced us to Joe Wright, so you have this whole thing of kind of being in the right place at the right time. And, and it was my segue, because I used to do a lot of music and arts at the BBC, which I loved. But, it was kind of moving into drama, and it's just this kind of sequence of events, which back in the day, it was small enough. The BBC was, even though it's this massive corporation, it was small enough to allow that kind of springboard of creativity and, and movement and also awe and wonder at, these productions that were being made, and it was in the heyday of the BBC where, there were 8 big studios, and at lunchtime you used to walk around all these studios, where there was all sorts of things going on, from drama through to opera, light entertainment, all of these productions in full flood. And it was just like, wow, this is eye-opening,
Yes.
and it was second to none as a training ground, and a learning process, and a discipline, actually, and working fast, and very kind of I don't know. I think one of the things that I really learned was in working with music and arts. It was what we call the Late Show. It's very different to your Late Show, but it was a music and arts, and it went out live every day at 10:30 at night, and that was incredible because you could try anything, because my whole philosophy was, it's not recorded. Nobody really watches it. If it fails, it doesn't matter. And if it succeeds, fantastic. And you go, okay, I'll remember that. That's one way of learning something.
But this really, everything is like stored in the bank memories. In Atonement.
Yes, that's true.
At the end of Atonement, when the old Bryony, Vanessa Redgrave, is being interviewed by Anthony Minghella, that set that Sarah designed was really reminiscent of the Late Show set.
It was the Late Show.
Oh,
it was supposed to be the Late Show. It was one of their, and in fact, it was the Late Show.
It was a great set.
Yeah.
So how everything means something.
And it's really interesting, being old birds now, it's kind of like old girls. You kind of look back and, and you can see the loops and the links of how things feed in and what you remember and how it works, and, what you learn from all of the people that you come across in.
That's true. And it goes back to the first easy question you asked us about creativity. It comes all the way back to that. Everything, everything is stored in the memory and is use and is creative.
And also, and also kind of the psychology of it as well. It's how to cope with certain things that go wrong and certain people that are over challenging, and all of that, I think, is such an important, that is such an important learning curve. It's how do you cope with abject failure or whatever? But going back to the Late Show, when there were abject failures, it didn't matter because it was over by 11 o'clock. Nobody saw it. And it's gone.
There you go. There you go. I mean, I think of a quote that my scenic design professor, Ricardo Hernandez, would often share, which was, "Speak not of success, the deed is all." Rather than to say, it's just so important to do it, put out the work, and obviously you hope for more successes and failures, but the failures are instrumental. And it's an ongoing weaving of this tapestry that follows you through life, that I think it's just brilliant to kind of thread these connections from different moments in your life that all find their way into the work somehow.
But I think just going back to this whole thing of creativity and allowing it to flourish, too often it becomes so channeled that you can't flourish. And I think one has to be aware of that, and I mean, fight it to a degree. Know when your battles are lost as well. That's something I have learned the hard way. You fight for certain things, and then you go, right, that's it. I'm not hands up. I can't do any more. But if we don't fight for what we believe in and the vision that we have, and our craft and our cause and all of that kind of thing, and often we are fighting for the director's vision as well.
Right.
Do you know what I mean?
Right. Yeah.
We're first over the trenches, aren't we?
We are, yeah. So we were fighting, It's always usually a budgety thing, but it's easy to be editorial, right? So that when you said at first you must do the deed, get something done. At least if you get something done, then you have something. You have to begin. The blank page, the blank space, begin, and then you can.
Yeah, but also editorial or sharing, and it's like however you choose to communicate, and some people are immense. I'm going to say artistic talents, that there's all so many different ways of doing it, and maybe ways that we don't particularly know because we work with each other, and as designers you're lucky because you're getting to meet us all and ask us these interesting questions, right?
But it's not lost on me, that's for sure.
No, but you kind of, you don't know other people's methodology, and you only hear of it from your teams how other people work. But, it is that thing of putting something out there to have it, crushed or kind of built upon or all of that. And, and it's not being afraid. And I think, that's
that's why it's good, the collaboration, to have a sounding board, to have somebody that you can trust, because there isn't, I mean, obviously there is, but you have to say there's no such thing as a bad idea, even though, all ideas are valid. But, you can go, even if I came up with the worst idea, I would say to Sarah, well, I just really think that, the colour for Barbie should be black. Right. And well, the colour for Barbie should be pink. But that would start a, why do you think that,
But our next film was Back to Black,
It was,
actually.
yeah.
And that's the way it
Well,
went.
isn't there something to these conversations where you leave with more questions than answers? I think these are kind of these wonderful conversations where it just forces you to think about something in a different way, right? Now, I'm curious about, because you mentioned budget, and budget immediately brings to mind theater and this sense of making a lot with a little. So I'm curious how your theatrical backgrounds have influenced your work in film and shaped your sensibilities.
Oh, I think the knowledge and certainly sort of the appreciation and love of theatre. Having said that, I'm glad I no longer, I'm really pleased I no longer work in it, because I do really think it's a young person's game, especially unless you make it really big, because there's a, it's really hard work and not that financially rewarding. But I think it is amazing. And it goes back almost, it has some similarities, Sarah, to The Late Show, because it's live. It goes out live. It is taking something from a script and distilling it. It is certainly, I personally have never been as nervous about anything as I have been once cueing a musical. And there is I don't know, it's part of the, it's, I mean, I feel our work is like being in the circus, and it's part of the circus. It's part of life.
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I worked in theatre for about 3 years, studied theatre design, then worked in theatre for 3 years. And when I first went to the BBC, it was like the shackles were off. Do you know what I mean? There was a whoa, this is it. And there's a number of things I'm thinking about it. The number of things I loved about what we do now, film, television, is the freedom, and the freedom of imagination as well. I'm not saying that, good theatre design is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal. And a lot of my friends are still theatre designers, and their work is phenomenal. And that's one of the reasons why I left as well, because I feel my work is more suited to not doing theatre design anyway. But when you look at theatre, you are looking at it from one point of view. You're in a space, you're looking at a space, and you are, that's your focus. And, how many times it changes? Well, obviously nowadays there's amazing lighting, but in my day, it was like, look at one spot and that's it. It's kind of, that's it. Whereas in film and television, you are telling a story from an atom to a universe and everything in between, and I just absolutely loved that. And I also loved the fact that in theatre, you're constantly building up to this night that is then going to run for 3 months or 6 years or whatever. Whereas and it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. Whereas in film, it's kind of reversed. The fact that you are on day one, it's like that. And then it just goes, it distills and it distills and it distills until, day 60, and you're shot, and wow, that's an amazing feeling. So I like that about it. It's a kind of reverse.
Yes.
I don't know if that's creative, but
well, I think it kind of is. And also, and I think how it influences our work as well. It's not just the front of house; it's the backstage. There's something that's really visually exciting to see the mechanics of how things work. Whether it's literally behind the curtain in The Wizard of Oz, it's seeing that, and and people love going on film sets and seeing behind and seeing it's not real and all of that. And
but you can say that about theatre as well, though, can't
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah,
and, if you look at something like Anna Karenina, certainly without our
brilliant,
without our knowledge of theatre, we couldn't have got that done so quickly.
Well, no, and also couldn't have got that kind of understanding of what we were doing. What kind of, and that's also Joe coming from theatre as well.
Yeah.
This is one of my favorite films of yours, is Anna Karenina, and I'm curious if you might speak for just a moment as to how you arrived at the theatrical approach.
Mm. Money. Actually, going back to your question about budget, that was pure money. So we were going to do it, and we were going to shoot 6 weeks in Russia, 6 weeks in the UK on in one of the smallest stages, 3 mils, I think it was, and we went to Russia. We did some scouting, and we kind of came back and with this revelation that it was the budget was going to go nowhere. We would be lucky if we could get a week out of Russia because of the whole, you know,
Strangely corrupt.
strangely corrupt. Yeah, we can say that now. Completely corrupt, and it wasn't going to work. And and then then they said, "Oh, can we shoot it in the UK?" And I was like, and then, "Can we shoot it in London?" And I was like, "No," and it was just, the whole thing was just imploding. It was like a cake getting flatter and flatter, and we had, and then it was going to fold. That was it. We just couldn't achieve it. Which was interesting, given that the BBC made War and Peace a year later, and they managed to shoot there. Anyway, by the by, so we didn't manage it, and then one night, Joe phoned me up and said, so one of the UK locations we were looking at was a derelict theatre called Alexandra Palace, and he phoned up. He said, "Okay, think Alexandra Palace. Think about doing the whole film in a derelict theatre." I was like, "What on earth do you mean, Joe?" He said, "Okay, but I'll take the most difficult scene and describe it, and then we apply it to all the other scenes, right?"
Yes.
So he described the horse race, and it was like, and that's how we do it, so that everybody believes they are at the races, or everybody believes that they are, in the drawing room of the Oblonsky mansion, or that they are in, and it was like, yes, and then it comes back to what I was saying about theatre, where you have, it's the best theatre design is the kind of distillation and the refinement of how you get, what is that scene about, somewhere in that theatre, and I mean, it isn't in fact the stage and the auditorium, it's everywhere and anywhere and everywhere in that theatre. Where would you put that scene? Where does it most apply? How do you make it work? And that was how we did it, and we had to turn it around in a week.
Yeah.
We had to, Joe and I had to we'd been to Russia, we'd all been to Russia,
which was invaluable,
which gave us an understanding
Research.
of Russia and how it works. I mean, that's just like, a couple of weeks over there, but it was astonishing. And all the books we bought,
Yeah.
in
all
the Russian,
weapon
all the
painted.
all the anyway, reference books, and then we had to turn it around on a sixpence. Our budget, ironically, went up fourfold. We moved to Shepperton. We took over 4 massive stages, and we had 12 weeks to build it in.
Wow.
We started building it before we'd even drawn it. We said, "Okay, this is the theatre, on stage, A stage. Here's the theatre. It's going to have a balcony, and it's going to sweep round here." So literally, Nick and Niall, the supervising art director, drawing it out with the construction manager. We're going, right, this is the metal work, and then that was it. We were up and running.
That film is so fantastic. It's sort of a testament to the power of imagination, And I think just opening your eyes, or opening the audience's eyes to sort of the magic of cinema, being able to turn an idea on its head into something completely unexpected that really captures the spirit of the film. And I imagine also gives the actors a space to play in that is very sort of inspiring on another level.
It's interesting that, because that's probably where collaboration comes across the board for that. Everybody had to, be singing from the same hymn sheet there. And weirdly, I thought that about actors at first, and I thought, well, maybe they're a bit more used to it than the rest of us because they've done theatre and things like that, this like Brechtian. But everybody had to be on board, didn't they? And they had to believe it. And I mean, I'm like you. It's one of my very favourite films. I think it doesn't succeed all the way through, but I think it's certainly a brilliant attempt in taking a classic, one of my favourite, books, and doing something different with it.
Yeah.
And I loved it.
And also to say, the collaboration between, those all of us,
And also because it was Philippe was going to shoot it. And
Philippe Mosier was going to shoot it, and he did his back in, didn't he, or
Yeah.
something? So Seamus took over from Philippe, and Jacqueline Duran, who's the costume designer who we work with loads. Again, she was there, and it's just because we all knew each other so well,
Yeah.
and we've all worked together, and it was just like it was kind of like a steamroller, wasn't it?
And Sidi Larby, who was the brilliant choreographer.
Yeah,
and of course, there's this guy Joe Wright had quite a lot to do with it as well.
An amazing team. I'm curious how you two divide your responsibilities when things really kick into gear in a way that feels sort of fluid and organic rather than very sort of siloed and solitary.
I mean, it's interesting because, knowing we were talking about collaboration, and it's funny because it's something that we don't really talk about.
Yeah, we never kind of people say
being bashful.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I think people know that we now know how we work together. And so, producers and directors very much, acknowledge that. So therefore, and it starts even before we go on a project, when scripts come through, we both read them. We both talk about, is this, what do you think? Well, are we going to do this one? Are we going to, blah, 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 when you're lucky enough to have a choice. And, and then, it's something at the beginning that it's just this kind of heads together, just talking about it. And, there's no go-to way of researching or finding the key or whatever. Every film is different.
That's right,
Every film is going to have a different unlocking process of how do you start to get this together. And it's interesting because we were also talking about the fact that, if only producers would hear this, is that this is best money spent right at the beginning when, key people are on, whoever they might, whoever that might be, you put a lot of time and money and energy into that process right at a kind of critical moment. And you say, and that's, and obviously that's with Joe or whoever the director is. And then you're solving so many problems and creating so many solutions that then they get put into the script, they get put into the whole approach, the whole, if the budget isn't working for that way of doing it, that's Anna Karenina. Then you find this is another way of doing it. This is,
like on Beauty and the Beast with Bill and Greg, the director, Bill Condon, the director. But every morning we used to drive art department mad, didn't it? Because we used to be in there with 3 hours. They used to come to our office. We share an office, and we used to sit and just talk about the script, put ideas in.
That's right.
And Jacqueline was part of that.
It was in a hiatus, not because of the Beast and everything. It was in a hiatus, and so that's how we spent a good 6 weeks just chatting about it, and and finding solutions and finding financial solutions, budgetary solutions, and that is money really well spent in the very early days before there's 1,000 people on that you're going to have to stand down.
Yeah, and
absolutely.
Sharing information, I think, is really important. I mean, I think, everybody should be able to read the script. Quite often, studios don't allow the whole team to read the script, but I think everybody should read the script, and everybody is important in the team, in the structure of the team. However, goes to the triangle, but everybody is important. And the more they know, the more they read the script, the more they're invested, the better the job. And it's just so important.
But going back to, to that's how it starts. And then, then literally once, in famous last words, once you know what you're doing and you start, because this whole thing that, often on a film, you're not even paid to be on it in the first, you're doing your homework before you've started your job. And you're not paid for it. So you're investing all this time and effort and, research and whatever. Then you start. And that's when literally, Katie and I, we then go into our, want a better word, day jobs, setting up our teams, art department, set deck. But I think the difference with us and maybe this came from doing low budget, but previously we've always shared an office. Now we choose to share an office because that is the passage of information. This office has kind of gone with us. This setup that we have has gone with us over every film we've ever done, and it, to the extent that we recreated it as a set at the Academy Museum.
I was going to say, yes, very meta indeed.
It is. It was completely. I mean, honestly, getting that through the exhibition process was very funny when they suddenly turn our rubbish into white love. It's like artifact, and that's very funny. But anyway, that's another story. But so we share an office, and so that means that we're constantly. And all the meetings that happen in our office, unofficial meetings, not production meetings, but for example, on Barbie, Greta would always be in there because it's a safe place, it's a safe space. The art department, everybody would always come in. Joe would always work in there, and it was like so people would come in. So therefore, all the conversations that are really critical are in there, and are part that it's just part and parcel of everything that's to do with the making of the film, and equally, Katie, particularly, Barbie, Beauty and the Beast, the big ones where you have a massive team of makers and things. I would go around, follow Katie around like she was a matron on her rounds. In the same way, you come,
I would follow you.
Follow me, So you do.
You visit each other's workshops and check in.
You see, and it's you only get that kind of interface of. And
it fires things.
And it certainly does. And it certainly, and questions things. And is that really, is that it? Is it finished? But I wouldn't say that's finished. That's Katie to me. Never, and then of course, and then it all comes together on the stages. And that's when the dress, and we've always dressed the sets together. That's the icing on the cake. That's the fun bit, and I'm sure it infuriates the boys.
No, I think people are so kind of used to us for now, but we do. It is. I mean, it's exactly as you say, Sarah. We start together. We start tossing, talking through everything. That's in the early, all sorts of things. Then you kind of you go off with art department. There's the art department budget,
or location,
budget on location. There's all of that, and then we come back together. So it's kind of swimming.
Yeah, and also it's I mean, not to forget locations, because most of our early films were certainly mainly location based. That we would go out location scouting. We work a lot with Adam Richards, who's an amazing location manager, and that you're talking. You might be traveling for 12 hours in a car together, and you're, apart from gossiping, you're talking about the project and the film and this going to work with this and that, and then going on atonement, because we went to look at the Country Life Library, that happened in there to find the perfect location, which was that house.
And also we went on our own dollar to Dunkirk to see what that was like.
Yes.
Absolutely. You knew that was, again, it's the research, it's the early days that informed so much.
Yeah. And that was true because, Working Title was saying, oh, well, you're off to, the west coast of Ireland to shoot, Dunkirk. And it was like, well, having been, literally to Dunkirk for the night, staying in some red light hotel.
Not a good hotel.
And, realizing that Dunkirk, what it looked like, but also the fact that, it's on the east coast looking at the North Sea, which is flat and grey. The west coast of Ireland is blue and rough, and the next stop is America. That's not what, that's not what Dunkirk was like. So we went up the east coast of England and found our Dunkirk in, northeast England, which has that same flatness, that same slope of the, the sand.
And it was a resort town, it was where people would holiday. And therefore it was like there, don't know whether you know Blackpool, but it wasn't quite as big as that. But it was where people, the French would go on holiday. Yeah. And therefore that's when we put the big wheel in and all of that.
The circus horses.
That was all there. Yeah. But that's not really what Dunkirk is known for. But it's that contrast between the hell that was Dunkirk, and we met some veterans, and that was just extraordinary as well.
I imagine so, yeah.
Juxtaposed against the frivolity of a resort town. So,
Well, this actually brings up a great question about balancing historical accuracy with sort of this emotional truth, we'll call it, and where do you sort of find moments where it's okay to deviate slightly from what might be quote unquote historically accurate and lean into something that is going to serve the story? And I think this is also could be related to specific pieces of furniture or artwork that might deviate slightly from a particular timeline. I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that.
I think it all comes. I mean, we'll certainly start with the script. It all comes from the script and
Yeah.
what's said in the script. And I think there's two types. If you're doing something like Darkest Hour, which is recent-ish history, and about we were, moments away from losing World War II, moments away. I never knew it was so close. And what was interesting about Darkest Hour, again, this is a film with Joe Wright, and he kind of turned it into a countdown thriller. And do you remember? I don't know whether I should say this. Do you remember at the table that the first read through? Do you remember that?
God, yes.
And so we were sitting in the first read through. They're all there, and there was like a room full of white men, basically, because historically that was grey, white, middle-aged men. And there was Kristen Scott Thomas and Lily James. I don't know whether Lily. Anyway, there was like 3 women and like 19 grey men. And
Typical.
I met Kristen Scott Thomas in the loo, and she said, "God, it's so boring. I had to come out." Right, it's what she said. Right. So Joe took this sort of kind of mundane, ploddy sort of. I shouldn't say this anyway. We won't listen. Script and turned it into something really quite. Oh my God! And Gary Oldman's performance obviously is sensational.
Yeah.
But so it's something like that. When we created the War Rooms, there are certain things, even though that Sarah will talk about this, it's a feel of what the war rooms were like with absolutely accurate things within it, like the maps, because you owe it to. If you're talking about people losing their lives, which is probably somebody's father or grandfather, you owe it to be accurate. But obviously, in that you do, because you're talking about Retreat to Calais, where people sacrifice their lives, and you put certain things within the set that will pinpoint accuracy. And then you're allowed to take liberties, I think.
I mean, I think as well, and I think it's an interesting thing, specifically for that film, actually, but it's an interesting thing. I think it's like your knowledge and your research and your creativity, you find, as much as you can know about your subject and around it. And then once you know that, then you can, that's what we did on Anna Karenina. We knew a lot about Russia, and we'd done our research, and we had this amazing, references. And, I'll do a shout out for Phil Clark, who's an incredible picture researcher that I work with. That he's, that's where it starts. But you have that. And then once you have that knowledge, then you can choose. You're not making a documentary. You can then cut away. And how are you going to interpret that? And this is where real creativity comes to play, is what is a better way of telling that story? Because you have to tell it either quickly, or you have to tell it subtly, or you have to tell it emotionally or dramatically, whatever reason is, so then you're doing something. So you're doing something like, for example, on Barbie, everybody walked down and said, "Oh my God, I had a dream house like that," right? Oh my God, you so didn't, because that is not the dream house. We have not recreated. We're not recreating Mattel. That is our interpretation. That is our English interpretation of what Barbie was like, and the palette was.
But it's right, they said that.
But it is correct that they said it, because it's like, I had one like that, and great, then we've succeeded, because in fact,
you are.
It feels right. Whereas if we'd literally created the Barbie dream house, and again, I hope Mattel don't listen to this, it wouldn't have looked very nice. And what Greta wanted was something that looked beautiful, and it would have just looked very plastic and not at all like pornographic colors. Yeah, but
you sort of tapped into this Mandela effect almost of remembering something that hasn't actually happened.
Yeah,
right?
Of course, it's a sense of something, and that is what we do on, and it's like on Atonement, the green in Atonement, particularly the color of paint. I'm not talking about Kira's beautiful dress, but the color of paint, was this arsenic green. And you go, whoa, that is a really pokey color. But actually, because we'd seen it on one of our scouts, we'd seen it in this kitchen area of a stately home. And you thought, really? Really? And it was such an amazing color, arsenic green, that we used it, but you'd never have been brave enough to use it had you not seen it. So therefore that's a purity of something coming out, but again, it looked exceptional in that section of the film. The green in that section of the film was everything. It was fecund to the point of rottenness, ripe to the point of rottenness, I think was one of Joe's sayings. Yeah. So
Absolutely.
it's when things are what we choose to leave in and let go, and the essence of, and
I mean, I think it is that. If it's a work of fiction, I think there's more license. You need to give the audience something that they understand. Something. I mean, Anna Karenina is a good example. They need to have something. Here, it's the character of Anna. That they understand. That they understand the marriage, and then you can go on a larger journey. But you need. I don't want to be lost all the way through a film. I want to.
You need the truth of it.
You need a truth of it, and then I can fly around.
Yeah.
Just something.
But again, it's the essence of it, isn't it? It's what's your sense of it and what's your smell of it. And so going back to Darkest Hour, we made Downing Street in a derelict Georgian house in Yorkshire, and it's nothing like Downing Street. The stairs in Downing Street, we all know from Love Actually, in fact. You come into Downing Street, you go into the hall, and you go to all the way through, and you've got this yellow staircase at the back of the building. Nothing like that. Our staircase was in the front, and but it's all those
you take them, all the photographs and paintings of all the prime ministers,
and and then so people, nobody ever questioned the fact that it was completely wrong. Because it feels completely right. It's not right, but it feels right. So, you're constantly. If we were doing recreations, it would be so dull. It would be so dull. It wouldn't tell the story. And the other thing that was interesting was when, with Darkest Hour, we were shown around Downing Street with Gary. In fact, we went there, and it was amazing. Once you were through security, we could go anywhere in that building. It was incredible. What was incredible was the fact that it's a dirty, derelict old house. And it wasn't until Margaret Thatcher in the 80s moved in, and she said, look, we've got to do something. We've either got to move out or renovate. So she renovated it. But all of the floors are like that. They were so rotten. All of the walls were, everything riddled with woodworm and dry rot and everything. But that is what we made the house look like in Darkest Hour. It was completely rotten because it was rotten.
That's exactly true, and that's a way of accuracy, as finding something about. I mean,
tells the story.
Which tells the story. Britain was on its knees. It hadn't got out of the debt and the issues and everything that we'd done for the First World War, just like 20-some years before, and literally were beg, stealing, and borrowing.
Yeah,
and it was only his kind of bravado
that got us through.
brandy that got us through it.
Yeah, and also, but this is where, in fact, I did reference other films, which were is it Valkyrie and what was the other one?
The German film
about Hitler.
Yeah.
Anyway, and what was fantastic about those films and the look of those films was the fact that the purity of the look and the design was so incredible. That you and the color, which was very cold and grey, and the suits, the uniforms were stunning. Everything about in Valkyrie in particular, was just something else. And it was kind of like what we were going to be was the polar opposite of that, because it was held together with pins and elastic bands in every sense of the word. That's what our film had to represent.
That's just struck me now. That Darkest Hour was a war film without Nazis. There was no Nazis, and we were like, and it just sort of kind of struck me. So that means you're having to tell a story with kind of your villain off stage.
Yeah.
Which is quite,
it is, but I think it speaks to a lot of monster movies. If you remove the monster, you arrive at what the film is really about, It's amazing. I was thinking the other day about this idea, this sort of equation in my head that is when preparation meets spontaneity, it equals sort of an intuition of sorts. And I think there's an intuition that's at play through all of this, isn't it? Just sort of tapping into the essence of not only the script and the story you're telling, but the energy of each other in the room, and feeding off of this sort of unspoken energy that sort of exists.
And I just say it's the bravery, because I think if you're on your own, sitting in your room, twiddling your thumb, thinking, how am I going to do this? It gets frightening, going back to being a little child and having things like, damped down. Whereas, being with each other, and even this is before we talk to people like Joe, but it's like, and it's kind of, it makes you not just doubly brave, but triply brave. It's that synchronicity grows, so it's like, shall do you think so? Yeah, go on. What the heck? There's nothing to lose, So there's a lot of that.
You need a sounding board.
Yeah.
I think, and everybody needs a sounding board.
Yeah. And also not being frightened to say, well, that's a really crap idea. Or that's a great idea.
Yeah. Or maybe not that, but maybe that's a good idea, because then we could do that.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
I want to go back briefly because you mentioned Greta Gerwig's comment about making Barbie beautiful. And it is a beautiful film in many ways. And there's one moment that is sort of the counter to beautiful, that is Ken's makeover to the dream house. I'm curious if you might spend just a moment reflecting on that and kind of finding the balance of really what that needed to be.
Well, I'm going to start that because I couldn't suss it out. I'd gone to Greta with all these ideas and references and say, is it this? Is it that? And she goes, no, you don't need, because, I'm sure Greta wouldn't mind me saying this, disentangling, Greta's script, what Greta wants is, is a huge kind of, challenge.
Is that the key into a director?
And it really is. And, and I do believe we got most of it right. But this was one instance where I was flummoxed by it. And it's and in the end I was like, and you then went and challenged.
Yeah. I thought, well, we just got to find out what we're doing here, because it's obviously not. And I said, literally, I remember the words, do you really mean this ugly, Greta? Do you mean this ugly? She went, yeah, I mean this ugly. And that was it. So basically, that was the key thing. It's that for many, so Barbie Land, everything was created, and we had these rules, so everything was created. So the idea for Ken was obviously he went to the real world and brought everything back. So it was a relief, actually. It was an absolute relief that we could just not stop making things and start buying things, and just bringing things in. And it really was that ugly, and you were channeling your worst ever first boyfriend or your irritating younger brother, and and also you can just put what you like, and everything was sort of influenced by what he saw there, but he always got it slightly wrong. So he put his burrito or whatever, crisps and chips in the liquidizer or something, because he didn't quite know what he was doing. But
all his plastic food.
All his plastic food that he used to grill on the barbecue. So everything was slightly wrong. And also back to collaboration, you kind of at this point, you knew what Ryan was like. So he would just you would put it all in, and then they would come in and he would just play. So there'd be a bit like Robert Downey on Sherlock Holmes. They have this really great thing. They take whatever is in there and they make it better. There's there's hundreds of things that are never seen, but sometimes an actor will inhabit the set and do something and make that one thing that's seen, and that will capture everything. So you can't dismiss them from the equation.
But interestingly, how ugly. And then, in fact, it's one of my most favourite images in the film. So, so the palm tree got knocked over by the Hummer. Not that you ever see that, because, of course, we can't represent the Hummer like that. But, so the whole thing is destroyed by the Kens, but not vandalized, so there's this really fine line. So then the 22 massive TVs, and it's like, because the houses didn't have walls, where'd you put the television? So the televisions ended up
All in
going
the wrong place.
all in the wrong place because the Kens don't know where to put them anyway. So these televisions, and then of course the horse motif that just grew like Topsy because we all loved it so much. And there's this one moment when the sun's going down and they're all sitting on the three houses, and then you've got the screens with the white horse galloping in slow motion on all the screens. And I mean, I just think that is so poetic and so sad, you know. And
It's the beauty of melancholia, isn't
yeah,
it?
I love finding sort of these really artful moments within something that is
yeah,
very sort of unexpected.
yeah.
I'm curious about taste and personal tastes and, finding a moment like this, for example, where you have to really remove your personal taste from the equation in a sense. Is this sort of a struggle, when there are moments where the environments you're creating are counter to what it is that you're personally drawn to?
I don't think that we're particularly personally drawn to anything that we do, really. I don't feel that. I don't feel, you know when something sits and it sits right, but it's not about, I don't think it's about personal taste per
No,
se, is
it's
it?
interesting. If you look at all the different kind of types of films and stories, you kind of inhabit that story. So your
It's true.
taste hopefully becomes the taste of the film, of the
Mm.
script, of the characters you're doing. And for that moment you learn to love the taste of
It's like
scenes
yes.
until you get sick of them. But
Yes,
yeah.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
it's like a word,
Yeah.
suddenly you learn a new word and then you
Yeah.
see it everywhere.
Yeah.
You see it written everywhere, you hear it everywhere. So yes, so it becomes very prevalent, doesn't it?
Mm.
And you learn about something that, it's like Victorian in as you say, Sherlock Holmes, not my personal taste at all. But in fact, you come to respect it and
Mhm.
kind of you're interested. The more you find out about it, the more you find it
Because
interesting.
it comes from the character,
Yeah.
you know. And I always say, look, we all live in a period film. We all live in period time. We're all living in the same year, but all our homes are completely different. Completely different. Even if we all do the same job.
Yeah.
And I think that's absolutely true. You learn to hopefully, if you've got it right, you learn to have empathy and understanding for the time you're dealing with,
Mm.
whether it's something as basic as Back to Black, or
Mm.
something as intrinsically beautiful as a Pride and Prejudice. You learn to find your way through.
But and what was interesting to say about something like Pride and Prejudice is that in itself told a story because their house was so dated because they've not spent money on it for 30 years, 40 years, and the furniture that they inherited would have been uh ancient and was very, very decrepit. But to our modern eyes, we're looking at that going, that is the most beautiful furniture. And it is because it's so beautiful, is it? But actually, Mrs. Bennet, if she'd had her way, would have got rid of all of it and done a total makeover on the house. And it would have looked like, what was the house called?
Netherfield.
Netherfield Hall is let at last. It would look like Netherfield, which actually, to my personal taste, was really ugly, but it's kind of,
Yeah, but it is literally also about the characters. It's how they would operate within that, whether it's the Dunkirk beach,
Mm.
which is all the soldiers, and how they would literally survive on, they're all waiting there to be evacuated, and all the injured are going to be left behind. I mean, horrific. Or whether it's, I don't know why Amy Winehouse is in my head. I can't get rid of her, quite frankly. But how she lived in her tiny house with such a huge personality. It's absolutely fascinating, but
It's a psychological study, isn't it?
it is a psychological study.
mm,
Yeah.
mm,
I'm really drawn to the Bennett house. It has such a personality that when I watch that film, there's something so atmospheric about that film, and in particular with this really amazing score. It's one of my favorite film scores of all time. The
yeah.
spider web and the
Yeah.
dew, and it's just so comprehensive. And I know that even, down to the animals that are sort of scattered about, it's a very much in your world, isn't it? Of kind of visualizing this space beyond just the aesthetics.
And it's interesting because, you know, a lot of our films have a real kind of key set that is you keep going back to. And my worry about Pride and Prejudice was that we would get bored by the fact that we're going back to this house again and again. But it actually gave the house a kind of gravitas, that gave the film a weight, and gave it a, you know, it was like a reprieve. It centered it. It was like a chorus to it.
It's true. An
But, you know,
energy in itself.
Yes, and it was like, you know, but again, that was a house that the actual house, in fact, was the house. It was only been filmed in once before. It was a private house. It was shot in for
Draftsman's
the
contract.
draftsman's contract,
Mm.
which, you know, this incredible, and that was always very symmetrical, very da da da, you know, and all of that. And, you know, I watched it again knowing that we were going to use it, or thinking we would we, should we? And the way we interpreted the Bennett house within that space was so different. You know, we lost all the formality of it. All the rooms, we built scenery within all the rooms, because all the rooms were dark brown, and that's the one thing we didn't want, was for the house to be dark brown. So, you know, it was completely, it would have been so much cheaper to have built them on a stage, but Joe wanted this fluidity of inside and out, you know. So that's why it was all, so in fact it feels and looks nothing like the draftsman's contract, but that was a worry, that it was going to be.
Well, it feels rather of the earth itself, you know. It's very organic space, and I think this photographing it with this sort of blending of the inside and outside almost blurs that line in a sense, doesn't it?
Completely. And also the fact that I mean, it's interesting because that, you know, so going back to authenticity, you know, when we made that, the BBC's production with Colin Firth had just been out and was much loved by everybody. And in a way, it was like we weren't doing that. We were not recreating another, you know. And Joe said, well, you know, why don't we take it back to the time that she wrote it? She wrote it in 1797, as opposed to 1812, 1811, when it was published. So we took it back into Georgian times. So it wasn't a regency, it was earlier. And the whole thing about Georgian times, it was much more robust. You know, the girls were even more robust. There was something, as you say, earthy about them, the way they lived, the fact that the encroachment of the exterior of the house, the farm was coming in. They were on their uppers. They were so broke, which is interesting because having watched the other Bennett girl,
I watched that.
Not one reference to the fact that they were broke.
That they needed desperately,
that they
to
were
be
desperately to marry these girls off. That was the only way that they were going to succeed. You know?
What's really interesting, and we haven't spoken about, I think is really important, is landscapes in film as well. You know,
absolutely.
Landscapes and the balance between that and, you know, that especially because it was an interior exterior. That was why that was chosen. You know, all of the, you know, the travel through landscapes, Kira on Stanley, all of those things. It's so important. You know,
I mean, as well, you know, it's about the way we make films is so different now. You know, the fact that we made that with a core team of about 50, and we were so light on our feet. You know, that you know, the scene where Mrs. Bennet runs across the bridge with the geese flapping and they're on the lake, that was supposed to all take place inside, but the sun was so beautiful. And it was like we couldn't balance the inside and outside. So we just said, right, everybody clear back. Let's shoot it this way. One go before the sun went down.
Yeah, and also it really became like a family thing because, you know, everybody remembers all the animals, the birds, the pig. And
sweet.
It's because they all lived there the whole time. It wasn't like, okay, a pig was called occasionally, but all the poultry, all the ducks, all the dogs, they lived in the house. And the animal handlers, and you couldn't do this now. They were called, not barely human, almost human, right? And they were great. And at the time when you'd ring them up and you'd say, oh, can you do us a deal? We're going to get you like somewhere to stay, which ended up being a
caravan on location.
And poultry. And all of that. And the
barbecue at the end.
And the button. And we didn't do, wish we didn't. And then, you know, there's photographs of us all wrangling all the animals, you know, including Jane Fraser, the line producer, because everybody, it was kind of an innocent time. Everybody, there was no, you can't do that because it's not your job. It was like, come on, everybody, we need to get the film done.
Well, also, it was just like you didn't have the, you know, and because we don't have unions here, you know, everybody just does everything. I suppose it's more like non-union filmmaking here, but it's filmmaking here, isn't it? Or
Yeah.
so
I mean, it's a double-edged sword, that.
yeah, it is rather.
I want to ask about scale because, Pride and Prejudice had, like you said, a crew of 50. Up in some of your larger films, I'm sure have had, in the hundreds, of course. So when you have a very large crew that's working just for you two and in the art department, how are you in the set decoration? How are you keeping everybody inspired? What is it that you instill in these artisans to maintain a unified vision and keep everybody sort of on the same page?
I tell you one thing. Again, I think that everybody should read the script, but I know that's not always possible. But also on Beauty and the Beast, right, which had I'm speaking from set deck side.
Yeah.
How, we had, and also because Sarah and I did all their, what normally would go to the animators, all their character studies. And because it was Rococo, and because it was Enchanted Rococo, and we were making everything, and it wasn't just this is a Rococo chair, this is a chair with enchantment. We took the makers and all the key members of the team. We took them all out on a day trip as well. We took them all to which people love getting out of the studio. They love it, And we took them all to this museum called the Wallace Collection in London, which is the home of Rococo, because it's very difficult to describe it, and it's so 3D. You need to see it. You can't just get it from your best book of Rococo. And actually, also because they saw it for themselves, because you took the time, because you brought them in, and because you are always kind of appreciative. You can be, say that's not right and things like that, but appreciate the talents that are supporting us because they are phenomenal. I was knocked out on that. By the skill of the sculptors and things like that. And I just think, it's phenomenal. We are nothing without those who support us. So I think you have to go around all the time, all the workshops and everything, and tell people, share information, I would say.
I mean,
absolutely.
I think we're lucky again, we're lucky enough to be surrounded by complete talent, and it's a case of, we take a lot of people with us. Our teams expand and contract depending on the size of the project, but we have core members of the team that we will always, go to if they're free, so you build up a shorthand, you build up a kind of knowledge, you build up and again, it goes back to this understanding of not being scared. Let's just, here we go. What's this? And in fact, Eva Kuntz is one of the illustrators I work with, who is just brilliant. I've worked with her for about 25 years now. She was the one that worked out on Barbie that the scale was 23% less than human scale. I mean, it was just really, she's just, she's been burrowing away, and apart from the fact she creates all this amazing stuff, she goes, oh yes, well, I've worked it out, and she comes in with these models that, and she just,
oh, that's fantastic.
And you have this kind of input from people that is really surprising. And my thing is, you work to people's skills. Not everybody is good at this. Not everybody's good at that. Everybody's good at something. Otherwise they wouldn't be there. That's a given, but, it's a meritocracy. So you find out where is a particular skill, and then you build upon that. And also how those skills can actually steer certain things. So, it's like, the sculptors that you had in your model making department was so brilliant that it gives you no fear, that you're going, wow, that's amazing. And it's like,
and it fires your imagination.
And it fires your imagination. And also, something like on Serrano that we shot after COVID in Sicily, and we had these incredible painters, Christina Ciccioli, she's Italian and also works in America, but she's amazing. And it's this crossover between being it's a different thing. She's not a scenic artist. She's not a scenic painter. She's both. And her genius at painting three-dimensionally just solved all our problems, that we couldn't set up a sculpting shop. We couldn't set up a plaster shop. We had to paint it all for building this theatre, and the fact that she and her team were such geniuses, it was just like fantastic. That solved that problem.
Yeah.
It was a major problem. It was how on earth are we going to do this for the money and the time and and so you lean into whatever people are going to give you, and I absolutely love that. And and also it's a tough job, and I just think the enthusiasm that people bring to the to the to the film is immense, and it's the only thing that gets us all through, because we all have days or weeks where we sink into a pit, and it's your team that bring you up and out.
And sometimes it is daunting going around all of the workshops or the sets, because you don't always know the answer, and there's always going to be 1,000 questions. And it is, again, we have 1,000 questions for the director,
And we never get to ask that.
and there's 1,000 questions that we get asked that everybody needs to know, in the team, and you don't always know the answer straight away. And I think sometimes you go, well, I'm not, if you don't know, you've got to be brave enough sometimes to say, don't know that yet. I need to, which is difficult. It's difficult.
I think it's, I mean, in the days before the internet, being on Hadrian's Wall with Joe Wright in a snowstorm wearing sandals. I mean, it was just one of those days. And he said, Sarah, what do foxes live in? And I don't know, hole. I don't know. And it's like, I don't know, Joe, but I will find out. And that was one of those moments where I just thought, I have immense knowledge about a lot of things, and I busk it a lot. And I just thought, no, I really don't know what kind of hole a fox would live in up there in the snow wearing sandals. Yeah. I don't know.
But if I ask you now do you know where foxes live?
I do know where they live.
There we are.
They live in lairs.
I would have said a burrow, so there you go. Now I've learned something.
Yeah, pretty much the same thing. Yeah.
Well, mainly they live in people's gardens
Under sheds.
Under sheds.
Under sheds.
What is something that you all have learned from each other over all this time that you wouldn't have learned working alone?
That's like kind of everything in a way,
And that's a valid response.
Yeah, because we've worked together. So
I say I don't know.
Nothing. No, I think it is kind of because you're learning all the time, and because it's been such a long time.
Yeah.
But I suppose I think it is everything, and it's sort of to listen maybe as well, which is a big thing, because there's two of you, you have to listen.
Yeah.
Because if you don't listen, you're not going to be collaborative, and you're going to fall out because, I suppose,
I think that's great.
I'm being quiet now.
She's listening.
I'm listening to you, Katie.
Now, I'm curious, on the topic of finding a collaborator, what advice do you all have to emerging designers about finding the right person to go on a journey with?
Yeah, how do you? I mean, it's easy to say you've got to find somebody, but what would be the advice about finding the right?
I don't know. I don't know that. I don't think you can set out necessarily to find someone. Do you know what I mean? I think I think it's like our working relationship. It started and it was fantastic. It was after Miss Julie, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was the first one, and it suddenly it struck me after we'd finished. I thought, oh, it's going to be sad. Not working with Katie again. And then it was like, then something else came up, and Katie was free, and then it just evolved into this kind of rolling, very satisfactory kind of evolving working relationship. But it wasn't consciously going out and saying, I'm looking for a collaborator. And also, you can have many collaborators. I think a collaborator, a really good one to have is a director who's a collaborator. I think Joe Wright for us is, tricky and difficult at times.
It's not the same sort of collaboration, but no. But it is a collaboration.
Yeah.
You can still speak your mind. It is not always, welcome.
Yeah.
But you've got to kind of do it anyway, I think.
Yes. I think if you don't challenge,
you have to. Yeah.
if you're being asked or told to do something that you think is wrong, or I don't know, it's just wrong, it isn't going to work, or you can't afford it, or whatever, I mean, it's an interesting thing working with Joe. Is very different from us, in so much as, you start off and it's this wide, I describe it as a funnel. It's this wide funnel where you're dropping all sorts of information and ideas and thinking, and it's all going in there. And from him, and from, and then it distills and it comes down, and if something either is not going to work, is not a good idea, you can't afford it, or whatever, you got to catch it and fish it out before it goes too far. If you catch it and fish it out early enough, it's forgotten, lost and forgotten. You go, Joe, I'm not sure that we should be going to this country for that. That's not going to work. You go, oh, okay, why not? Blah, blah, blah. That's not going to work. Fine. If it goes down and down and down, it goes into this distillation process and it's dripping out the bottom, you're too late. And then you've landed yourself with some issues that are going to be really difficult to solve, because it's
It's really interesting as well, because whether they're a writer-director or just a director, that's another difference,
Oh, yeah.
Greta's a writer. She can change it. We just worked with Joel Cohen. He's a writer-director. And he said something which I never really thought of before. He said, and it was just like in a conversation. It wasn't like out of anything. He said, we've got to kind of remember is that I've been in my head. He said, I've been writing this for years and it's all in my head. So it's going to take me a bit long. It's going to take me a while to distill it, because it goes back to what you were saying about Joe. He's been writing the script for a long time. When we come Joe, we're kind of there at the beginning, and he's, it's like all of us. If it gets set too soon, then.
But I think that is what is great about, Joe. With all the projects we've done with Joe, there have been a couple we haven't done. That's a longer story, but the ones we've done with him, he's very open to ideas and thinking and questioning, and I love that, and bringing things into a script that's, he's not necessarily written, but he's working with the writer and he's saying, well, we'll put that in, we'll take that out, we'll do this, we'll do that, and I think that's real creative collaboration there. The fact that you can push and pull with ideas, and is really interesting.
That openness really is very valuable, isn't it?
Yeah. And so, so one of the things I say when we meet a lot of students, is we were lucky enough to find Joe when we were starting out. He was starting out, and that growing together and discovering together this world of filmmaking, that just like grew like Topsy. But that moment of, is great. And then, it gives him the confidence in us, and vice versa. And I think that's a fantastic relationship to have. And when a lot of the people that you've had on the podcast, work with the same directors, and, it just, I remember we spent a weekend in Copenhagen with Nathan and
That's when I
Phyllis.
first met Nathan.
Yeah.
Phyllis, yeah.
And, and interesting, hearing him talking about, working with Chris Nolan and us working with Joe, and the parallels were incredible. The differences were massive, but the parallels were very interesting as well, and how you work, and how you work. And,
That's brilliant. What is it that keeps you all inspired between projects?
Depends where in that time between projects you're at, actually.
Yeah.
So, when you've just finished a project, it's fantastic reconnecting with your life.
Yeah.
And your friends and your house and your family, and all of that is amazing. And that lasts a good, couple of months. And then, and then you start doing all your things that you're supposed to do, which is like your accounts and your taxes and all that crap, and your health and all of that. And then you get to a point where you start getting twitchy, going, right, what's next? And you kind of, so it's a never ending cycle, I suppose.
Well,
isn't it?
again, it is a full circle. It goes back to creativity, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Your question at the beginning, it's the same as it was when you were little. You think, okay, now you have time to go to galleries. Now you have time to do this. Now you have, I want to go to Bilbao. All the things you want to do, you have the time to do it. And you hope you're going to get another job, so you want to do it quite quickly. Because
the money
the money
is
then
going,
runs out.
Right, is that, yeah.
So all of those things, and it's, do you know what it is? It's so amazing, the jobs that we have, and they enable us to live really a nice life, not an, a monthly exotic or extravagant life, but
well, it is by other people's standards. The fact that no day is the same.
That's
the fact that we travel the world, and we get into places and meet people.
Yeah,
you'd never think you're ever going to meet in a million years. I mean, how incredible.
I mean, last year, the year before, we went to Egypt, and I mean, that was being with the Egyptians, going, not just seeing the pyramids that we all know about, but the earlier pyramids in the middle of nowhere. It was just, we were paid. We were paid. I mean, all of that sort of thing is extraordinary. I mean, you don't remember when you're doing the crack den in Birmingham. It's quite the same amount of fondness, but
also in the same job we went to the Russian border in Estonia in the snow, where we're here and the Russian border is 100 meters away, and they're watching you through binoculars
and they're in your phone
and they're listening to you.
They actually said that, they'll be in your phone.
Yeah. So I mean, wow. And again, that, and it's interesting. So, all of that goes back into the pot of how, remember being in Russia and going around all that the incredible palaces in Russia, and seeing the fact that, their dining rooms were based on England, their libraries based on Germany, their ballrooms based on France, this is St. Petersburg. And you're literally, you can look into two doors, and down the middle you've got a wall, and that's French and that's German, and that's and that has such an influence on the palace that we built for Beauty and the Beast.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that every room was a completely juxtaposing, Swedish, the Nymphenburg Palace, it
the
was
library, the Portuguese
library. It was like, you'd never have the nerve to do that had you not seen what they'd done in Russia. That was all on Anna Karenina. So you're constantly,
you take it with you
everywhere you go, and all the times we've been to Morocco, and what that information that's filled in, that actually we should be in Egypt, not in Morocco for this particular film. It's kind of like you learn and you see, and it's
So I think being inspired just doesn't stop. It really doesn't stop. And you can be sitting at home watching something on the television, and it can be as mundane as that, or looking out at a glorious view. It can be anything. So I think if you're open to it, same as creativity, it just keeps on going.
I think that's beautiful. I love this idea of sort of your lived experiences. Your work is sort of a reflection of your lived experiences, It all finds its way in. And I also love that you brought us full circle with creativity. You two are storytellers in the highest regard, and I'm really grateful that you took some time to share your stories with us today. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Alexander.
It's been a pleasure, and thank you for asking such erudite questions.
Yes, absolutely.
Really great.
We will interview you next time.
Yeah.
That brings us to the end of our conversation today. I'd like to give a shout out to my co-producer, Gavin Mosier, and the composer of our original music, Nathan Avakian. As a reminder, if you enjoyed today's program, please consider taking a moment to rate the podcast and subscribe for upcoming episodes. Until next time, stay creative, and thanks for listening.